The village of Woodbury lay nestled in the rolling hills of the English countryside, a place where time seemed to move slower, where the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant murmur of sheep grazing in the fields. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the modern world, until the whispers began. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible, like the distant hum of a power line or the low thrum of an engine idling far away. But soon the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. It was a sound that crept into the bones, a vibration that resonated deep within the chest, a low, omnipresent drone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Thomas Harris, a grizzled farmer with hands calloused from decades of labor, was the first to notice it. He had always been attuned to the rhythms of the land, to the subtle shifts in the wind, and the quiet rustle of the trees. But this sound was different. It was unnatural, alien, and it filled him with a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He tried to ignore it at first, chalking it up to fatigue or perhaps the onset of age. But as the days turned into weeks, the sound only grew louder, more intrusive, until it became a constant companion, a relentless presence that haunted his every waking moment. He tried to describe it to his neighbors, to the few friends he had in the village, but they only looked at him with pity or amusement. "It's all in your head, Tom," they said, patting him on the back as though he were a child. "You've been working too hard. Get some rest, and it'll go away." But it didn't go away. If anything, it grew worse, more oppressive, until he felt as though he were being slowly driven mad. He began to lose sleep, his nights spent tossing and turning as the sound reverberated through his skull, a ceaseless, maddening drone that refused to be silenced. It was during one of these sleepless nights that he decided to take matters into his own hands. Armed with a flashlight and a determination born of desperation, he set out into the darkness, following the sound as it led him deeper into the countryside. The night was cold, the air sharp with the scent of frost, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie silver light over the landscape. He walked for hours, his breath visible in the frigid air, his footsteps crunching against the frozen ground. And then, just as he was about to give up, he found it. The source of the sound was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a structure, or perhaps the remnants of one, hidden deep within a copse of trees. It was ancient, its stone walls weathered and cracked, its roof long since collapsed. But it was not the structure itself that caught his attention. It was the sound. It emanated from within, a low, resonant hum that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. And then, as he stepped inside, the sound intensified, filling the air with a vibration so powerful that it seemed to shake the very ground beneath his feet. He didn't know how long he stood there, transfixed by the sound, by the strange, almost otherworldly energy that seemed to radiate from the structure. But when he finally emerged, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, and he knew that his life would never be the same. He returned to the village, his mind racing, with questions, with a sense of dread and curiosity that he couldn't quite articulate. He knew that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that defied explanation, and he knew that he couldn't keep it to himself. It was this realization that led him to Sarah Bennett, a journalist who had made a name for herself by investigating the strange and unexplained. She had come to Woodbury on a whim, drawn by rumors of a mysterious sound that had been plaguing the villagers. She had expected to find nothing more than a few superstitious locals, perhaps a case of mass hysteria, but what she found was far more intriguing. Tom Harris was not the kind of man who believed in ghosts or aliens or government conspiracies. He was a practical man, a man of the earth, and yet here he was, telling her about a sound that had no source, about an ancient structure that seemed to hum with a life of its own. There was something in his eyes, a desperation, a need to be believed that made her take him seriously. She listened intently as he recounted his story, her mind already racing with possibilities. Could this be the key to a story that would catapult her career to new heights? Or was it something more, something that could change the way they understood the world? She decided to investigate further, to see for herself what Tom had discovered. She accompanied him to the structure, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. And when she heard the sound, when she felt the vibration coursing through her body, she knew that this was no ordinary phenomenon. It was something beyond their understanding, something that defied logic and reason. She began to document everything, taking notes, recording the sound, interviewing the villagers. And as she dug deeper, she began to uncover a pattern, a series of similar reports from other parts of the world. There was the town of Taos, New Mexico, where residents had been complaining of a low-frequency hum for decades. There was Windsor, Canada, where the sound had been linked to unexplained seismic activity. And then there were the more obscure reports from places like Largs, Scotland, and Kokomo, Indiana, where the sound had driven people to the brink of madness. It was as though the entire world was humming, vibrating with a sound that no one could explain. Sarah knew that she needed help, that she needed someone with the expertise to make sense of what she was uncovering, and so she reached out to Dr. Emily Carter, a renowned acoustic scientist who had spent her career studying the effects of sound on the human body. Dr. Carter was skeptical at first, dismissive even. She had heard countless stories of mysterious sounds, of people claiming to hear voices or music that wasn't there. But there was something in Sarah's voice, a sincerity, a determination, that made her agree to take a closer look. When Dr. Carter arrived in Woodbury, she was struck by the quiet beauty of the place, by the way the light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. But there was something else, something that she couldn't quite put her finger on. It was a feeling, a sense of unease that lingered in the air, like the calm before a storm. She met with Tom Harris, listened to his story, and then accompanied him to the structure. And when she heard the sound, when she felt the vibration, she knew that this was no ordinary phenomenon. She set up her equipment, her instruments designed to measure sound waves, to analyze frequencies, and as she worked, she began to uncover something extraordinary. The sound was not just a single frequency, but a complex interplay of tones, a symphony of vibrations that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. It was as though the structure was a conduit, a gateway to something beyond their understanding. And as she delved deeper, she began to uncover a pattern, a series of anomalies that suggested the sound was not of this world. But what did it mean? What was the source of the sound, and why was it affecting people in such profound ways? These were the questions that haunted her, that drove her to continue her research. Even as the sound began to take its toll, she found herself losing sleep, her nights filled with strange dreams, with visions of a world that was both familiar and alien. And as she worked, she began to feel a sense of urgency, a need to uncover the truth before it was too late. For Tom Harris, the sound had become a part of his life, a constant companion that he could neither escape nor understand. He had tried to return to his normal routine, to the rhythms of the farm, but the sound was always there, lurking in the background, a reminder of the mystery that had consumed him. He found himself drawn back to the structure, to the source of the sound, as though it held the key to some great secret. And as he stood there, listening to the hum, he felt a sense of connection, as though he were part of something much larger than himself. Sarah Bennett, meanwhile, was consumed by her investigation, by the need to uncover the truth. She had always been driven by a sense of curiosity, by a desire to understand the world around her. But this was different. This was something that defied explanation, something that challenged everything she thought she knew. And as she worked, she began to feel a sense of responsibility, a need to share what she had discovered with the world. But as the days turned into weeks, the sound began to take its toll. The villagers, once dismissive of Tom's claims, began to report hearing the hum themselves. It started as a faint whisper, a low vibration that they could feel more than hear. But soon it grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. They began to lose sleep, their nights filled with strange dreams, with visions of a world that was both familiar and alien. And as the sound grew louder, so too did their fear. Dr. Carter too began to feel the effects. She found herself losing focus, her mind wandering as she tried to make sense of the data. She began to experience headaches, a constant pressure in her skull that made it difficult to think. And as she worked, she began to feel a sense of dread, a feeling that she was on the brink of something terrible. And then, one night, as she sat in her makeshift lab, surrounded by her instruments, she heard it. It was a voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering words that she couldn't quite understand. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. And then, as quickly as it had come, the voice was gone, leaving her with a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. She knew then that she was dealing with something far beyond her understanding, something that defied logic and reason. And as she sat there staring at the data, she felt a sense of urgency, a need to uncover the truth before it was too late. For she knew that the sound was not just a phenomenon but a warning, a harbinger of something much larger, much more dangerous. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, she knew that the world would never be the same. The hum was not just a sound, but a message, a call to action. And it was up to her, to Tom, to Sarah, to uncover the truth before it was too late. For the hum was not just a mystery, but a threat, a force that could change the world in ways they could not yet imagine. And as they stood on the brink of discovery, they knew that they were about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the world, about themselves, and about the very nature of reality. The hum had become a global enigma, a low-frequency resonance that transcended borders, cultures, and languages. It was no longer confined to the quiet village of Woodbury, where Tom Harris had first stumbled upon its eerie source. Now, it was everywhere, a pervasive, insidious presence that seeped into the lives of people across the world, leaving chaos and confusion in its wake. From the deserts of New Mexico to the icy plains of Canada, from the bustling cities of India to the remote villages of Scotland, the hum had become a shared nightmare, a phenomenon that defied explanation and demanded answers. In Taos, New Mexico, the hum had been a part of life for decades, a low, persistent drone that locals had come to accept as part of their reality. But in recent months, it had grown louder, more intrusive, until it became impossible to ignore. Maria Gonzalez, a mother of two, had lived in Taos her entire life. She had grown up hearing the stories, the rumors of a sound that no one could explain. But now, it was different. The hum had become a constant presence, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. It was in her home, in her car, in her dreams. It was everywhere, and it was driving her to the brink of despair. Maria had tried everything to escape it. Earplugs, white noise machines, even moving to a different part of town. But nothing worked. The hum was relentless, a force that seemed to defy all logic and reason. And as the days turned into weeks, she began to notice something strange. The sound was not just affecting her, it was affecting her children as well. Her youngest, a bright-eyed boy named Miguel, had started having nightmares, his sleep filled with visions of shadowy figures and strange otherworldly landscapes. Her daughter, Sophia, had become withdrawn, her once vibrant personality replaced by a sullen, distant demeanor. Desperate for answers, Maria began to reach out to others in the community to see if they were experiencing the same thing. What she found was both reassuring and terrifying. The hum was everywhere, a shared experience that united the people of Taos in their fear and confusion. But it was also something more, a phenomenon that seemed to be growing, spreading as though it were alive. And as Maria dug deeper, she began to uncover a pattern, a series of strange occurrences that suggested the hum was not just a sound, but something far more sinister. In Windsor, Canada, the hum had taken on a different form. Here, it was not just a sound, but a vibration, a low-frequency tremor that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth. It had started as a minor nuisance, a faint rumble that locals had dismissed as the result of nearby industrial activity. But as the weeks passed, the tremors grew stronger, more frequent, until they became impossible to ignore. Buildings shook, windows rattled, and the ground itself seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Detective James Jim Walker, a retired police officer with a reputation for solving the unsolvable, had been called in to investigate. At first, he had been skeptical, dismissing the reports as the result of overactive imaginations or perhaps a natural geological phenomenon. But as he delved deeper, he began to uncover something far more troubling. The tremors were not random. They followed a pattern, a series of precise, almost rhythmic vibrations that suggested an intelligent source. And as he dug deeper, he began to uncover a connection to the Hume, a link that suggested the two phenomena were part of the same, larger mystery. Jim's investigation led him to a series of classified documents, files that had been buried deep within the archives of the Canadian government. They spoke of a secret project, a series of experiments conducted during the Cold War designed to manipulate the Earth's crust for military purposes. The project had been abandoned, the files sealed, but the implications were clear. The Hume, the tremors, they were not natural phenomena, but the result of human interference, a byproduct of a technology that had been unleashed without fully understanding the consequences. In Largs, Scotland, the hum had taken on a more sinister tone. Here it was not just a sound, but a presence, a force that seemed to invade the minds of those who heard it. It had started as a low, persistent drone, but soon it had evolved into something more. A voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering words that no one could understand. But the people of Largs had tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, but as the days turned into weeks, the voice grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. For Dr. Raj Patel, a geophysicist from India who had come to Largs to study the phenomenon, the Hume was a puzzle, a mystery that defied all logic and reason. He had spent his career studying the Earth, its movements, its rhythms. But this was something different. The Hume was not just a sound. It was a force, a vibration that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. And as he delved deeper, he began to uncover a connection to the seismic activity he had been studying in India, a link that suggested the Hume was not just a local phenomenon, but a global one. Dr. Patel's research led him to a series of strange, almost otherworldly discoveries. The Hume was not just a sound. It was a signal, a message encoded in the vibrations of the Earth itself. And as he worked to decode it, he began to uncover a pattern, a series of anomalies that suggested the hum was not of this world. It was as though the Earth itself was trying to communicate, to send a message to those who could hear it. But what was it trying to say, and who, or what, was sending it? As the days turned into weeks, the hum continued to spread, its reach extending to every corner of the globe. In Kokomo, Indiana, it had driven people to the brink of madness, their nights filled with strange dreams, their days consumed by a sense of unease that they couldn't shake. In Bristol, England, it had become a source of fascination, a phenomenon that had drawn scientists and researchers from around the world. And in the remote villages of the Himalayas, it had taken on a spiritual dimension, a sound that was seen as a sign from the gods, a call to action. For Sarah Bennett, the journalist who had first uncovered the mystery in Woodbury, the Hume had become an obsession. She had traveled the world following the sound, documenting its effects and uncovering a pattern that suggested it was not just a phenomenon, but a warning. The Hume was growing, spreading, as though it were alive, and as she delved deeper, she began to uncover a connection to the ancient structure Tom Harris had discovered, a link that suggested the Hume was not just a sound, but a force, a power that had been unleashed without fully understanding the consequences. And as she stood on the brink of discovery, she knew that the world was on the cusp of something extraordinary. The Hume was not just a mystery, it was a revelation, a force that could change the way they understood the world, the universe, and themselves. But it was also a threat, a danger that could not be ignored. And as she prepared to share her findings with the world, she knew that the journey was far from over. The Hume was just the beginning, a whisper in the dark, a signal from the unknown, and as the world listened, they knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. But what was the truth? What was the source of the hum, and why was it affecting people in such profound ways? These were the questions that haunted them, that drove them to continue their search, even as the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. For the hum was not just a sound, it was a call to action, a warning from the unknown, a force that could change the world in ways they could not yet imagine. And as they stood on the brink of discovery, they knew that the journey was far from over. The Hume was just the beginning, a whisper in the dark, a signal from the unknown. And as the world listened, they knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. The hum had become a symphony of chaos, a cacophony of low-frequency vibrations that resonated across the globe, weaving its way into the fabric of human consciousness. It was no longer just a sound, it was a force, a presence that defied explanation and demanded answers. From the ancient stone structure in Woodbury to the seismic tremors in Windsor, from the whispered voices in Largs to the sleepless nights in Taos, the hum had become a shared experience, a phenomenon that united humanity in its fear and curiosity. But as the world grappled with the mystery, a deeper truth began to emerge, a truth that lay buried beneath the noise, waiting to be uncovered. In a dimly lit laboratory on the outskirts of Beijing, Professor Li Wei stared at the data streaming across his monitors, his mind racing with possibilities. He had spent his career studying the cosmos, the vast, infinite expanse of space that held the secrets of the universe, but now his attention was focused on something far closer to home: the hum. For weeks, he had been analyzing the sound, breaking it down into its component frequencies, searching for patterns, for meaning, and what he had found was both extraordinary and terrifying. The hum was not just a sound, it was a signal, a message encoded in the vibrations of the earth itself. It was a language, a complex interplay of tones and frequencies that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. And as he delved deeper, he began to uncover a connection to the cosmos, a link that suggested the hum was not of this world. It was as though the earth itself was trying to communicate, to send a message to those who could hear it. But what was it trying to say? And who, or what, was sending it? Li Wei's research had led him to a series of startling conclusions. The hum was not a natural phenomenon, it was artificial, a product of advanced technology that far surpassed anything humanity had ever created. It was a signal, a beacon, designed to attract attention, to draw in those who could hear it. And as he worked to decode the message, he began to uncover a pattern, a series of coordinates that pointed to a location deep within the earth, a place where the signal was strongest. But what lay at the center of the signal? What was the source of the hum? These were the questions that haunted him, that drove him to continue his research, even as the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. For Li Wei knew that the hum was not just a mystery. It was a warning, a harbinger of something much larger, much more dangerous. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in New York City, Sofia Martinez sat hunched over her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she hacked into a series of secure networks. She was a prodigy, a self-taught hacker with a reputation for uncovering secrets that others wanted to keep hidden. And now she was on the trail of the biggest secret of all. The hum. Sofia had been drawn to the mystery by the sheer scale of it, by the way it seemed to defy all logic and reason. She had spent weeks poring over data, analyzing reports and following leads, until she had uncovered something extraordinary. The hum was not just a sound, it was a network, a global system of hidden infrastructure that seemed to be emitting the sound. It was as though the entire planet was wired, connected by a series of underground installations that were humming with a life of their own. But who had built these installations, and why? These were the questions that drove her, that kept her awake at night, as she delved deeper into the mystery. And as she hacked into the networks, she began to uncover a pattern, a series of connections that suggested the hum was not just a phenomenon, it was a weapon, a tool designed to manipulate the earth itself. Sofia's investigation led her to a series of classified documents, files that had been buried deep within the archives of the United States government. They spoke of a secret project, a series of experiments conducted during the Cold War, designed to manipulate the Earth's crust for military purposes. The project had been abandoned, the files sealed, but the implications were clear. The hum, the tremors, they were not natural phenomena, but the result of human interference, a byproduct of a technology that had been unleashed without fully understanding the consequences. But as Sofia delved deeper, she began to uncover something even more troubling. The hum was not just a weapon, it was a signal, a beacon designed to attract attention. And as she worked to decode the message, she began to uncover a pattern, a series of coordinates that pointed to a location deep within the Earth, a place where the signal was strongest. For General Mark Thompson, a high-ranking military official with a reputation for secrecy, the whom was a problem that needed to be contained. He had been aware of the phenomenon for years, had even been involved in the early experiments that had led to its creation, but now it had grown beyond his control, spreading across the globe, drawing in scientists, journalists, and hackers who were determined to uncover the truth. Thompson knew that the hum was not just a sound, it was a threat, a force that could destabilize the world if it were ever fully understood. And as he watched the investigations unfold, he knew that he had to act, to contain the situation before it spiraled out of control. But how? How could he stop something that was everywhere, that seemed to defy all logic and reason? It was during a late-night meeting in a secure facility deep within the Pentagon that Thompson finally made his decision. He would reveal the truth, but only to a select few, to those who could be trusted to keep the secret. And as he sat down with Li Wei, Sophia, and a handful of other experts, he began to explain the origins of the hum, the experiments that had led to its creation, and the dangers that lay ahead. The hum, he explained, was the result of a series of experiments conducted during the Cold War, designed to manipulate the Earth's crust for military purposes. The project had been abandoned, but the technology had been left in place, buried deep within the Earth, where it had lain dormant for decades. But now it had been activated, triggered by a series of seismic events that had awakened the system, causing it to emit the low-frequency vibrations that had become known as the hum. But the hum was not just a byproduct of the technology. It was a signal, a beacon designed to attract attention. And as the system had awakened, it had begun to send out a message, a call to action that had drawn in scientists, journalists, and hackers from around the world. But what was the message? And who or what was it meant for? As Thompson spoke, the room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The hum was not just a mystery, it was a warning, a harbinger of something much larger, much more dangerous. And as they sat there, staring at the data, they knew that they were on the brink of something extraordinary, something that could change the way they understood the world, the universe, and themselves. But what was the truth? What lay at the center of the hum, at the source of the signal? These were the questions that haunted them, that drove them to continue their search even as the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. For the hum was not just a sound, it was a call to action, a warning from the unknown, a force that could change the world in ways they could not yet imagine. And as they stood on the brink of discovery, they knew that the journey was far from over. The hum was just the beginning, a whisper in the dark, a signal from the unknown, and as the world listened, they knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. But what was the truth? What was the source of the hum, and why was it affecting people in such profound ways? These were the questions that haunted them, that drove them to continue their search, even as the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it became impossible to ignore. For the hum was not just a sound, it was a call to action, a warning from the unknown, a force that could change the world in ways they could not yet imagine. And as they stood on the brink of discovery, they knew that the journey was far from over. The hum was just the beginning, a whisper in the dark, a signal from the unknown. And as the world listened, they knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered.